Be sure to subscribe and click on the bell for notifications on future uploads. Hello everyone, Sylvan Bart here, or you can call me Sully. Now it's time for the films of 2023 I saw in theaters and IMAX. 87 of them to be exact. Yes, I saw 87 films in 2023. And the same rules I made in the Movies of 2022 video apply here. But this time, there's going to be a top 10 list of favorites and least favorites, and a list of runners-up, as I have more films I liked in 2023 than before. So naturally, let us go into the movies that I saw in theaters in 2023. Women Talking. The drama is simple in its premise and the characters do their performances nicely. Even though the ending is obvious, it's pretty fine. 2.5+ stars. The Whale. An okay drama based on a stage play that's all presented in 4:3 aspect ratio and has a simple premise, amazing makeup, and Brendan Fraser. Yet there's one too many stabs at Brendan's character given his past and medical condition. 2.5 mixed stars. Megan. An okay horror film that has a typical premise for a killer doll movie like the 2019 reboot of Child's Play, but there's not much suspense, isn't scary, and some moments could have been elaborated more, even if it's an interesting take on this horror formula. 2.5 mixed stars. A Man Called Otto. A nice comedy drama that has okay comedy, if rather mixed, nice characters, neat premise, and decent music. Yet there's bits of repetition and one side story felt off to me. 2.5+ stars. House Party. The comedy remake of the 1990 film is a boring mess and not funny, except for a small chuckle, despite all the oddness and bizarre situations that surprisingly left me uninterested. 2.5- stars. Missing. The follow-up to Searching from 2018 is decent with all the editing, effects, and suspense working out well, including its narrative and characters, though it felt like it ends once too often. 2.5+ stars. Infinity Pool. The horror crime thriller is surreal yet interesting with its visuals, edits, cinematography, and twisted message of a story, yet some things aren't attention-grabbing and there could have been a better ending. 2.5+ stars. Knock at the Cabin. M. Night Shyamalan's thriller is quite baffling given how it all ended, but it's also okay for the initial setup and some intrigue. But it all goes nowhere and came out as a bunch of nothing. 2.5 mixed stars. The Amazing Maurice. The animated fantasy comedy is kind of all over the place for a fractured fairy tale of the Pied Piper, with a confusing narrative structure, fine character designs, some twisted moments, decent animation, and fourth wall humor. Overall, it's a fine mess. 2.5+ stars. Magic Mike's Last Dance. The third sequel to the Magic Mike films is well done for some nice chemistry, a basic enough plot, nice humor, and good dancing. And outside of one cliché moment, it's all quite a fine experience. 2.5+ or 3 stars. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. The horror version of the Winnie the Pooh characters is strange and bizarre, with a typical slasher plot, loud music, effects, and cinematography that's and deaths that might look neat but are barely effective. 2.5 mixed stars. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Marvel's third sequel to the Ant-Man films is okay with the cool-looking yet standard visuals, fine effects, a villain cameo that's silly but makes sense, an occasional joke I laughed at, and the main villain. 2.5 mixed stars. Cocaine Bear. The comedy horror is pretty silly yet very interesting for how zany it is with the violence and gore that's wonderfully neat and some fine humor. It's kind of fun in a near over-the-top way. 2.5+ stars. Jesus Revolution. A pretty neat faith-based drama that's quite wonderful for its characters and not being too preachy or one-sided. Although parts of the third act could have been trimmed a bit, and one relationship is better than the other. 2.5+ or 3 stars. Creed 3. A fine installment of the Rocky Creed franchise with a fine setup, boxing that's neat to watch, and sweet moments. yet some backstory on one of the characters made me a little confused. 2.5 mixed stars. Champions. The sports comedy remake of a 2018 Spanish film is overall fine for the setup and most of the characters, though most of the comedy didn't quite get me, except on occasion, and one relationship felt kind of complex. 2.5 plus stars. Scream 6. The sequel to the 2022 film and Scream franchise has good kills and twists tying to the last film. Yet the victim blaming and some predictable and obvious bits doesn't quite make it good enough for me. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. 65. The sci-fi thriller is okay for the neat amount of humor, decent effects, dinosaur action, and sweet moments, but also felt uninteresting as there's times where I wasn't getting invested in it as I wanted to. 2.5 mixed stars. Inside. The drama thriller is perfectly flawed with neat artwork and production design and simple plot, but also has several questionable bits and at times I did get lost in following it. 2.5 plus stars. Shazam! Fury of the Gods. A semi-decent sequel to the 2019 DC film that has a couple of pointless bits and my issues with the original remain the same. But there's a bigger threat, the characters have more to them, a few interesting visuals, and fine humor. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. John Wick Chapter 4. The action sequel to the John Wick films is pretty fun with fun action, stunts and kills, well done humor, neat characters, bits of suspense, and a surprising climax and ending. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. Air. The comedy drama inspired by true events on the origins of Nike's Air Jordans is alright for the feel of the 80s, soundtrack, and some charisma from the characters, but the humor wasn't grabbing me and much of the business talk made it hard to follow. 2.5 plus stars. The Pope's Exorcist. A decent horror film that isn't scary and has a lame ending, but some of the effects, the intense moments, the story and characters, and Russell Crowe make up for what flaws it has. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. Renfield. A fun comedy horror that has cool makeup effects, good humor, cool shots, cleverness with Renfield's character, Nicolas Cage, and fun yet over-the-top action with bloody violence and gore. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. Beau is Afraid. A cluttered mess of a movie that's confusing and such disarray that has no hope for the characters, giving the main lead no chance of standing up for himself. Aside from the surrealness and decent effects, it's all a maddening clutter. 2 stars. Paint. An awkward comedy that's a fictionalized satire of Bob Ross that feels like nothing but also has something for a couple of chuckle-worthy moments and its beautiful soundtrack, but it's all too awkward and an odd experience. 2.5 minus stars. Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. An interesting yet kind of boring fantasy based on the RPG game that has a lot to take in and is a mess for lame humor, off effects, and the villain, though the quest and characters and their motivations are fine. 2.5 mixed stars. The Super Mario Bros. Movie. Illumination's adaptation of the video game franchise is colorful and fun for its look and animation and action and references to other Nintendo properties. Yet, the drama points felt glossed over and barely mentioned. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. Evil Dead Rise. A decent Evil Dead movie that isn't scary but is fun for its presentation, nice camera work, some good twists and turns, good blood and gore, and a very satisfying climax and ending. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. A nice coming-of-age comedy drama based on Julie Blume's book with nice-looking settings, alright music, fine humor, and topics about growing up as a woman and religion are presented fine without being too mean. 2.5 plus stars. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Marvel's third installment of the Guardians of the Galaxy films is okay for decent action, some humor, neat effects, an intimidating threat, and flashback scenes with its characters, yet it often plays seriously than its predecessors. 2.5 mixed stars. The Little Mermaid. Disney's live-action remake of their 1989 animated film is fun and colorful with changes that make more sense, a nice and interesting cast, good songs both old and new, and though some of the effects are sort of off, they're good enough. 3 stars. Fast 10. The 10th installment of the Fast and Furious movies is alright for its fun action and effects, fine characters, okay humor, and many twists and turns. Yet the family bonding and big over-the-top action are what I enjoy the most. 2.5 plus stars. Hypnotic. A fun and inventive take on mind control that's complex as it goes and becomes understandable as it concludes, with lots of twists and turns in its simple manner and production. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. Love Again. The romantic comedy remake of a 2016 German film is just okay for its simple effects, an occasional joke, and featuring Celine Dion with her old and new songs. But parts are a bit questionable with some story points not clearly mentioned. 2.5 mixed stars. The Boogeyman. An okay horror film based on a Stephen King short story for the good lighting, decent monster, an occasional spooky moment, and a change in a typical horror story of no one believing. Yet it has little humor and not entirely scary. 2.5 mixed stars. The Flash. This is a fun and interesting DC movie with some surprising twists, often funny humor, big and amazing action, and cool cameos and in-jokes. Though some of the effects do look pretty off and one or two areas are not mentioned or touched upon. 3 stars. Elemental. Pixar's romantic comedy drama is such a lovely and beautiful film that's an overall unparalleled beauty that I can't get enough of, and I love it all. A well-made and crafted story, enjoyable characters, and colorful and great animation. 3 or 3.5 stars. Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken. DreamWorks' animated fantasy is such a lame film that it plays too safe, isn't funny, and sometimes tedious that it left me bored and frustrated with how it went. It may look nice and has little prejudice, yet I wasn't moved. 2.5 minus stars. Asteroid City. An alright but unusual comedy from Wes Anderson that's fine for its actors, sets, effects, and cinematography that are all neat, simple, and vast. Yet the humor and story structure are questionable, resulting in a mixed bag. 2.5 mixed stars. The Blackening. An okay horror comedy about black people in horror and media that has interesting insights in history, yet isn't much for the twists, ending, some predictable moments, and the advertising speaks for itself. 2.5 mixed stars. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. A neat but cluttered animated sequel to the 2018 Marvel superhero film that has cool animation and a good enough narrative than the first film, but it's a miss for its runtime, too much dialogue during the action, and too many spider people to count. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. An okay but kind of boring fifth entry of an Indiana Jones movie that's pretty long and uninteresting, with one too many characters and an unfun climax. Despite having slightly fine moments from the opening sequence, to well-made effects, and to tackling the traditions differently. 2.5 mixed stars. Transformers Rise of the Beasts. The sequel to the live-action reboot Bumblebee from 2018 has the same look, effects, and sounds of that film and fine enough action, but it's mainly a typical plot with typical scenarios for the characters, and all isn't much to like in it. 2.5 mixed stars. Barbie. A nice adventure comedy that's charming in a quirky way, with meta self-aware humor and morals and messages on how Barbie influences women and girls in a male-dominant world, though some of it is awkward with weird and silly moments. 2.5 plus stars. Oppenheimer. An okay historical drama that has well-deserved tension, unique effects, and insights in Oppenheimer's personal life, but it overstays its welcome with a third act, as the portions on the creation of the atom bomb is more interesting. 2.5 mixed stars. Haunted Mansion. A kind of boring and forgettable comedy horror that isn't funny or scary and has too much with the story and characters. Yet there's bits of morbidness, some fine effects and colors, and allusions and references to the Disney ride it's based on. 2.5 mixed stars. Talk to Me. The Australian horror film does have some effective scares and alright camera and lighting work, but it's such a been there done that plot of not giving the main character a break against an unending evil, which left me unmoved and somewhat depressed. 2.5 mixed stars. Sound of Freedom. An unpleasant, underwhelming, and very uneasy drama on a true child trafficking story in Honduras that disturbed me, and I felt uncomfortable during the length the film shows of kids in harm, in spite of its alright characters, small bits of humor, and okay music. 2.5 minus stars. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. The 7th entry of the Mission Impossible films has decent humor, fun twists and turns, good stunts and action, and a neat climax. And though I enjoy it given the energy, fun, build-up, and tension, the dialogue gets hard in the details. 2.5 plus stars. Blue Beetle. This DC superhero movie is a boring and very uninteresting one that all amounts to being kind of typical and lame. Despite the cool and decent effects, the action's too rushed and standard, the humor rarely gets a laugh, and I didn't care much about the characters. 2.5 mixed or 2.5 minus stars. Gran Turismo. An okay racing film that feels like a typical underdog story, which goes through the same motions and cliches. Yet there's some changes to the formula that are a little interesting, gripping action, and neat effects and camera work. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. The Meg 2 The Trench. The sci-fi thriller sequel to the 2018 film is okay for its fine action and kills and alright humor, more dangers and surprises. But it has a semi-repetitive plot and cliché villains, and not all being as fine as the first. 2.5 mixed stars. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. A meh-ish animated action comedy that's chaotic with unfunny humor, too many villains, gross-out moments, and some constant and rushed dialogue despite its cool-looking animation and in-jokes. 2.5 mixed stars. The Last Voyage of the Demeter. An alright retelling of Dracula as a midquel within the story on the ship carrying Dracula in his coffin that offers okay scares, decent violence, and nice makeup and effects, though some scenes either felt missing, are questionable, or are unnecessary. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. Strays. A fun and swell comedy about talking dogs that's made for adults, that's neat for its presentation and gets and understands what dogs go through in exaggerated ways. 3 stars. Landscape with Invisible Hand. A drab sci-fi drama that has no big resolution for the humans, becomes weird, and takes itself seriously without any surprises, suspense, or intrigue, aside from Tiffany Haddish's character and the aliens. 2 stars. Retribution. The action thriller remake of a 2015 Spanish film is a typical and quite thrillless meh of a movie that comes out more like a revision of 1994's Speed minus the excitement. There's okay action and effects, but not much. 2.5 mixed stars. Paw Patrol: The Mighty Movie. An okay animated sequel to the 2021 movie, has updated action, okay humor, and a cute moment here or there. But I prefer the first film as this one has too much to offer in its story, making it kind of cluttered. 2.5 plus stars. Saw 10. The 10th entry in the Saw franchise is just as well put together and enjoyable as the previous films, with the twists involved, the ending and mid-credits scene, human morality, and uniquely bloody and grisly traps. 3 stars. The Equalizer 3. The third entry of the Equalizer films is alright with its fine edits, camera work, understandable narrative, likable characters, and brutal and bloody action. But there isn't much else as the previous films to me were typical and meh-ish. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. The Nun 2. The horror sequel to the 2018 film of the Conjuring franchise is pretty mixed with a couple of effective jump scares, an interesting lore, and decent and unique effects, but it wasn't all scary and its violent content felt tame. 2.5 mixed stars. A Haunting in Venice. The third adaptation of a Hercule Poirot story by Agatha Christie is exceptionally well made, that's just as intriguing and neat as the previous films, with a complex yet engaging mystery, a bit of suspense, and some surprises. 3 stars. The Creator. A fun enough sci-fi drama that's a standout for its effects and some story implications, but it's an AI versus human story that's not as epic or gripping as The Terminator or The Matrix and has designs similar to Star Wars. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. The Exorcist Believer. The horror semi-sequel to the 1973 Exorcist film is an almost decent effort, even if it's not scary, with crazy effects and edits, decent makeup, bits of tension, and some creep factor with at least one nice and interesting scare setup. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. Killers of the Flower Moon. A decent Western crime drama about the Osage murders is quite an unforgettable experience, from the acting, to the music, to the staging. That's all wonderful, even if the film is very long with a questionable moment or two. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. The Holdovers. The comedy drama has a charming presentation of the 1970s, surprising character insights, a dash of good humor, and warm colors, songs, and showcase of the Christmas season. Yet it's a bit long and could have had more of a punch to the humor and some hope for the ending. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. Five Nights at Freddy's. The horror film based on the video game series is well made in presenting effective scares, decent twists, Easter eggs and nods to the games, and good effects and puppetry, though portions of the plot felt weak and boring. 3 stars. Expendables. The fourth entry of the Expendables films doesn't quite have the fun energy as the previous films, but it's close enough thanks to its fast, bloody action and the same old likability of the heroes. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. The Marvels. Marvel Studios' superhero sequel to Captain Marvel is okay for some fine moments ranging from neat and well-made effects to silly and laughable bits. Yet, it's also cluttered and somewhat forgettable for having elements to the Disney Plus series and is mainly jumbled and confusing. 2.5 mixed stars. The Hunger Games Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. The prequel to the Hunger Games films is serviceable at best, but meandering at worst, with questionable and darker story moments, better acting than the previous films, and insights in how the games were created and main character relationships. 2.5 mixed stars. Napoleon. The biopic of Napoleon Bonaparte has fine acting, sets, costumes, and cinematography, and interesting battle scenes with its scope and music, but it's too long and kind of boring to enjoy thoroughly. 2.5 mixed stars. Trolls Band Together. An alright enough third entry to the Trolls movies that has colorful animation, alright characters, and fine renditions of songs. But it also has a lot going on, most of which didn't get me much. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. Wish. This Disney semi-nostalgic anime musical fantasy is mostly a nice and okay one, with well-done animation, fine characters, and neat songs, though its numerous references and Easter eggs to previous Disney properties are much to take in and tend to be distracting at times. 2.5 plus stars. Priscilla. The biopic drama on Priscilla Presley has decent casting and moments with Elvis I didn't consider, but is presented boringly with a setup, muted and saturated cinematography, and an odd conclusion. 2.5 mixed stars. Thanksgiving. The holiday horror film is fun and bloody good for the twists and turns, grisly and bloody images associated with Thanksgiving, and despite some fake outs that are mostly predictable, I had a fun time. 3 stars. Saltburn. This drama is kind of boring and really didn't surprise me given its content, from the questionable 4:3 aspect ratio to the graphic moments of nudity, sexuality, and blood that are sometimes disturbing but also weird. 2.5 mixed or 2.5 minus stars. Wonka. The prequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is a sweet and tasty charmer with the same lightness and joy, memorable songs, and good humor, though some of its mean-spiritedness is a bit much. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. The DC sequel to the 2018 film is almost as good, with neat action, a good amount of humor, better effects, cool vehicle designs, and a packed yet fine enough story, though it's not quite as strong as the first film. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. The Color Purple. An alright musical drama that's adequate and fine for the enjoyable music and songs and exuberant choreography, yet it's jumbled in pace and tone and becomes unbalanced with harsh themes of maternal and slight sexual abuse and some racism. 2.5 plus or 2.5 mixed stars. Migration. A fine animated adventure comedy that has familiar elements of Rio, The Croods, and National Lampoon's Vacation with fine humor and characters. Yet the drama and conflicts the characters face seem brief and have little meat to them. 2.5 plus stars. Poor Things. The fantasy comedy drama is nearly fine for good makeup, okay humor, alright effects, well-made sets, unique cinematography, and sensibility involving the lead and her story, though some of the presentation is questionable. 2.5 plus or 3 stars. Silent Night. The Christmas action flick has fine action, bloody violence, and okay brief effects. But it's somehow boring as it goes, and it wasn't entertaining, even for a film with little to no dialogue. 2.5 mixed or 2.5 minus stars. Dream Scenario. The black comedy fantasy has a fine first half with okay humor, some charming acting, and bits of likability. But the second half has so much mean-spiritedness throughout that I end up hating the characters and moments, and it all becomes very despicable for me. 1 star. Ferrari. The biopic drama of Enzo Ferrari is mediocre with fine intentions in presenting its moments, but not much in executing them, with some exceptions such as the racing and crashing scenes. Yet the rest seems kinda boring. 2.5 mixed stars. The Boy and the Heron. Hayao Miyazaki's fantasy adventure anime is alright for its okay humor, decent animation, and familiar worlds and characters in a new light, despite some obvious character relations and continuity issues. 2.5 plus stars. Journey to Bethlehem. The musical comedy retelling of the first Christmas is alright for 1 or 2 songs, some presentation, and acting, and the ending. But the humor fell flat with some lame jokes, and the rest of the songs are forgettable. 2.5 mixed stars. Now here's a look at my top 10 least favorite movies of 2023. And my top 10 list of favorite movies of 2023. And my list of runners-up films of 2023. And that is it. So thank you for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe. Follow on Facebook or X. Support me on Patreon. And until next time, for a new video.